Actually, the conversations started a little bit with Sam Mendes when in the first year of the Bridge Project, because there were 3 seasons where Sam directed 5 productions. The first 2 seasons were 2, and the second season was 2, and then Richard III was the third and final. And we only did 1 show in the 3rd season, thank God. But we started talking in the first season. I think it was probably after I went to Epidaurus to watch Simon Russell Beale do The Winter's Tale, and I was just like, oh my God, we have to, whatever we do, we have to bring it to this theater. This is the most unbelievable theater. And then I said, maybe there's a way that we can capture this experience, because there were a lot of reasons why I felt like it was really unique. You know, it's probably been about 35 or more years since a theater company's gone around the world and done this kind of tour. It just isn't done anymore because it's just cost prohibitive. The fact that it was this unique combination of British and American actors coming together to do classic work. So it was the first transatlantic theater company. And so we started chatting about it. And then Jeremy, who had worked with me at the Old Vic as an assistant director in about 7 of our productions and had worked with me on Beyond the Sea, he came to me and said, I think you should somehow document this. And I was like, well, that's exactly what Sam and I have been talking about. We didn't quite know how to do it, and I was also quite reluctant to say what it was going to be. I think maybe almost anyone that has made documentaries will talk about the fact that you just don't know what it's going to be until you have it, and then it sort of tells you in editing. So I was quite reluctant to sort of give parameters, and this is what we're trying to do, and I want you to do that. You know, it was more like, just fucking capture it, and we'll figure it out later. So then, as we got closer, and then ultimately, I think it was not until the middle of the 2nd season of the Bridge Project that Sam and I decided on Richard III. And then it was a very sort of let's do it kind of decision. And, you know, we started in the rehearsal room, and Sam was incredibly generous, as were all the actors, to let the cameras in and sort of, you know, film that process as we went along. And then we really did figure it out in editing. When I was shooting last season on House of Cards, Jeremy and our editor came to Baltimore, and for 11 weeks, we cut what is now the film.
What was the parameter for the actors? Was it going to be like always? I mean, did they always know they were being filmed? In other words, or was there a period of where they had to get adjusted to the fact that cameras were around?
Well, there were some who at the very beginning, like Gemma Jones, never wanted the camera in her face. She was, get that fucking thing out of my face. And she was very clear about it. But as time went on, she started to get to know Jeremy. I mean, Jeremy's this lovely Irish lad, and he's very amenable, and he's very, oh yeah, absolutely, I didn't mean to disturb you. Go away. And so she started to like Jeremy, and she likes the boys, as you get from the film. So she started to soften up, and then, you know, by the time we were halfway through, she was lifting her skirt. She knew the camera was there. They all knew the camera was there. But I think that what was sort of great was that because Jeremy had, by this point, almost become a member of our company, people forgot there were cameras. It was like, oh yeah. And also because people didn't know what it was for. You know, like there was never okay, it's going to be a PBS documentary, and it's going to be on HBO. You know, we just literally didn't know how it was going to end up being, and then how it was going to end up necessarily being distributed, if at all. It could have been just a very expensive home movie, you know.
Have you filmed the play? Because after watching this, I'm thinking, boy, I would love to see it all put together, maybe on a DVD with the documentary.
No, I mean, I imagine that Jeremy probably shot the whole play in various places, but it wasn't designed that way. We didn't film it that way. No one was wearing mics. So it probably, even if we put it together, it would probably be a pretty haphazard and from different angles and places. I mean, it could be something that might be worth looking at, because I don't think we'll ever do it again, because it's just massive. And frankly, I have said this before, it's a wonder they didn't find my fucking bones in the parking lot like they did the real Richard III. Booking 200 performances. But it also wasn't what we set out to do.
When you played it in Epidaurus, is that how you said it?
Epidaurus.
Yeah. And you went back to the Old Vic. Everybody said that they knew the place so much better, and it was so. Is that because you were in an amphitheater and it was like so empty, stage-wise, that you were really had to fill it up? I mean, well, why do you think that performance?
I have to say that the Epidaurus experience was unparalleled. No experience I've ever had in a theater has ever been quite like it. To begin with, to rehearse in that space over a number of days was quite remarkable, but it is a very, very different venue when it's empty than when it's full. And the first time I saw it full was after we had to wait for it to get really dark, so it was like 9:15 at night when we could actually start the play. And also because you can't get 14,000 people down to the bathrooms in less than 2 hours. There was no intermission when we did it at Epidaurus. We did it straight through. And I remember I was backstage, and they were like, the green light goes on, and that's your cue to walk out the door. And I remember I scurried across the stage and sat down in the chair, and I went like this, and the lights came up, and I went, and Sam Mendes said to me after that performance, he goes, "Oh my God, it was the most terrifying thing to watch you for like the first half hour because you were breathing for like 4 people." Because it was, I mean, literally, I looked up and it was like a wall of people, a human wall that went like this, and it went as far as you could fucking see. And then it's that thing about why I was so grateful that we ended up doing 3 performances in Epidaurus rather than just 2. Because it took us 2 performances to learn how to play that space. I guess I should explain that the thing about the differences in playing different theaters and different venues, different sizes of houses, different shapes of theaters, is that it's all about how you hear your own voice. That's what acoustics are. Acoustics are about measuring how much energy and vocal power you need to be heard. And the only way that you can measure that is when you hear your voice back. And if you're in a theater where it doesn't come back, you then strain because you're trying to get it to bounce back at you. Off walls, off plaster, off staircases, off wood. The audience sucks up a lot of that vocal power. But in a place like Epidaurus, which has been built by geniuses, the human voice can carry all the way to the top. I had friends who came and sat one night very close and sat the next night all the way to the top, and they said they could hear better up there than they could right there. So what it took over those 2 nights to learn how to play that house, not just for me, but for the whole company. But also there's something about what happened to us in that environment. The fact that they've been doing plays in this place for 2,000 years, that Julius Caesar sat right there and watched plays. The gods were there. I mean, you could look up and see stars. And it was so majestic and so huge, and we felt, first of all, knowing we were the first time that a production of Richard III had ever played Epidaurus, that nothing had sold out as fast in Epidaurus since Maria Callas in the 1970s. I mean, we were just, it was extraordinary. So when we went back to the Vic, all of that experience, all of that feeling like we were part of something that was bigger than all of us was infused in us, and I think it affected all of us. And yes, it is true that Sam did come a few days after we got back from London and said, "Stop yelling! It's a smaller theater."
I was familiar with Richard III, and I'm also a big fan of House of Cards. But it's not until I saw this movie that I really realized there is a correlation between Francis Underwood.
Not just a correlation.
There's a lot of similarities.
No, Michael Dobbs based the character of Francis on Richard III. That's why direct address exists in House of Cards. You know, I know a lot of people think that Ferris Bueller created direct address. But he didn't. It was a guy named William Shakespeare. And he invented it in this play. He's not bad. He's got a big future. He invented it in this play. And that's why, for me, it was such a sort of amazing circumstance that I closed this play in March of 2012 at BAM. And in April 28th, I started shooting House of Cards. So I cannot tell you what that meant for me in terms of how I approached House of Cards, because...
Do you think you could have done House of Cards without just coming off of Richard III?
I don't think I could have done House of Cards if I hadn't spent the last 10 years doing theater.
No. Oh, really?
No, absolutely.
What do you think it is about this kind of character, Richard III, and also the House of Cards character, Francis Underwood, that attracts you to play him, that you've done it already at least 2 times?
Well, it really wasn't my choice to do Richard III. It was Sam's choice. He really wanted to direct me in this play. So I know people are always trying to find, you know, connect the dots. Oh, you must like always playing these kind of characters. But the truth is, I don't ever play these kind of characters in the theater. Richard III is the first time I've ever played this kind of character in the theater, ever, in my entire life. I have always done completely different kinds of things. What I would say is that there is no doubt that both of these characters are investigations into the corridors of power, into the nature of power, and that they're both characters that have such a remarkable ability to predict the way someone will respond, that they're able to be 16 moves ahead in the chess game, which is why they generally get what they want. And what was for me sort of incredible about having had the experience of doing Richard and then starting House of Cards was that I had been all over the world, breaking the fourth wall, looking out at the audience and talking to people and being able to see this relationship between the character and the audience and between Richard and the people he's telling the story to. And it was wild. I mean, people were like, they were like so like, I mean, I remember I would point at people and I would say, can you believe that just happened? And they'd go. And so when it came time for me to start doing the direct addresses in House of Cards, the memory of that relationship was so burned in me that it really helped me, because now I'm just looking down the barrel of a lens. I don't have eyes. And I've had to make a slight adjustment. Instead of thinking of so many people, I'm just trying to think of my best friend, who I'm telling things to that I wouldn't tell anyone. And in a way, I wanted to make it that sort of intimate thing that everybody, you know, we all know what it's like when you're sitting in a restaurant and somebody comes in who you sent an email to 3 weeks ago and they haven't fucking written back, and you're like, watch, they're gonna come over and they're gonna say, oh, I'm so busy. And he comes over and he goes, oh, thanks, I'm so busy, and you just go. All you have to do is just look at your friend and you both know what you're thinking. It's been very interesting to sometimes when Bo will write some line of dialogue into the camera and I'll just go, Bo, I don't think I have to say anything. I think they know exactly what I'm thinking. I think let's just not say anything. And so we just cut it. He's always surprised I'm the actor cutting lines.
One thing
more.
I really appreciated in the film was the nowness and like being in the present. Have you always approached theater in that way? Like, do you find it therapeutic being so just in the moment?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I can put it to you this way. One of the reasons I wanted to make the movie is because a lot of times over the last 10 years, people look at me like a very confused puppy. They're like, why did you go to London and like run this theater? And like, why do you do theater? And like, isn't it boring? And isn't it always the same? And like, why don't you just make movies and make money? I don't know who that surfer guy is, by the way, but
It's Hollywood.
Yeah. Here's what's incredible in terms of if you're going to make any kind of comparison between the experiences for an actor. Theater is organic. Film is not. Theater, you come every day and you work with a group of people and you're all up for it and you all get to do the whole thing every night, 2 hours, 3 hours. In film, you work in 2-3 minute bits, and it's never like in chronological order. And then someone takes that away and makes it look like it all happened, or that you gave that performance. But you might have given that performance in one take that way, and another take that way, and another take that way, and they put that all together and makes it look like that's the way you did it. And sometimes they make you look really good. And the big thing for me, for all those people who think, oh, it must be the same, I often use the analogy of tennis, which is if you play tennis, if you go out and you play 8 nights you play tennis, yeah, it's the same rules, but it's a different game every time you're out on that court. And you're working on a different part of your game every time you're out on that court. And your partner's working on a different part of their game. And you add to that the act of being watched, and that changes it. Because it's one thing if you go to a park and you're playing with a friend of yours and it's just the two of you. It's another thing if you go to a club and there's 15 people watching you with sandwiches and champagne and you're like, oh, fuck, I'm being watched. And so it is, theater is alive, and it is now. and then it's gone. And the other big thing I always remember, no matter how good I might be in a movie, I'll never be any better. It's frozen. But in theater, I can be better tomorrow night. I can be better the night after that. I can be better in a week. The journey you go through as an actor is incredible.
You know, you're talking, the thing that really moved me in this was the sand painting that they did, and they did this, and I went, oh my God. And I'm wondering, is that what you think the theater is? Do you consider it like that? Is it something, and is there a play that maybe you wish you had filmed, or a performance of yours that you maybe wish you had filmed, that didn't disappear, where only a few people saw it?
You know, it's a very funny thing. I'm of a very contradictory mind about this. And I accept that about myself. I'm a big contradiction, and this is one of them. Yes, I think it's fantastic that things like National Theatre Live and Metropolitan Opera have been doing these sort of live streamings into movie theaters. So you get up out of your house and you go and pay $25 and you watch a live or not live production. I think it's great. Some things are being captured. And I hope that will increase. I'm about to be a part of something that will open that up in a way that makes it accessible and for free on the internet in a slightly different way than what those particular schemes have done. But I also, while I think that's fantastic to plant seeds for people who don't really get theater or don't go, I also want them to go to the theater. I want them to experience theater in a theater, and not necessarily on a screen. So I do think there's value in capturing things, and I think as technology continues to grow and we continue to find ways in which to capture theater in a very exciting way, because the problem with it is you take a three-dimensional experience and you reduce it to a two-dimensional experience, and it is just not the same. But I think we're moving closer and closer toward being able to find ways to capture things that will be of value to keep on film. But it will never be the experience that you have when you sit in a theater and you look at something that's happening before your very eyes and it is alive. And no matter what, that performance that you just saw will never happen again. And the perspective from which you saw that performance is very different from the person who is down the aisle watching it from this perspective. That's why one of the things we do when we have opening nights, because the critics, they insist on sitting on the aisles. Because they don't want to sit there. They want to run out and start writing their review immediately. So they don't want to sit on the aisles. So it's like, that means that these people have spent 30 years watching plays from this perspective or that perspective. They've never sat in the middle. So we create an aisle at the Old Vic, and we stick them in the middle on a new aisle. We only do that for opening nights because I want them to see it from this perspective, because it's different.
Let him ask a question, I think I interrupted.
Oh, sure. Last question I want to ask you is, you're talking about Sam Mendes, and you've worked with him both on film as a director and in the theater as a director. What are some of the differences? Does he change as far as working with actors from different mediums, or is it all just the same?
No, it is all just the same, and I suppose that goes part and parcel with the fact that I don't think there's film acting and stage acting. I think there's just good acting and bad acting. And what was great about Sam when we first worked together, even though American Beauty was his first film, he took the best of theater and applied it to making a movie. So we rehearsed it for 2 weeks, like a play, with the entire cast. I mean, everybody was there, no matter how big or small their parts were. And we taped all the sets out on this big soundstage, and we rehearsed every single scene. So that by the time we got to the set, we knew what we were doing. We'd answer the big questions. We were ready to work and discover it on film. It's the same process in the theater. It's just longer, 6 weeks. We workshop the play, we throw it around, we try different ways in. And he's also one of those, I would say, rare directors who not only give you a great direction, but they know when to give you that great direction. I mean, there are times when I would have been doing something for weeks in a particular way, and then like in a third preview, Sam would go, I think tonight, you try it, blah, 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 this way. I don't think the way you've been doing it is right. And you go, why didn't you fucking tell me that 6 weeks ago? It's because you wouldn't have been able to take the notes 6 weeks ago. But now you can. Now you understand more now than you did then. And so it's about a director watching how actors are developing and shifting and changing, and when they're ready for a note, he just brilliantly knows when to give it to you. That's pretty good. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Am I leaving? Am I going?
How was your IIFA experience this weekend?
Oh, it was extraordinary. I mean, yeah, we had a great workshop with them, and I was very happy to be there to welcome them to America, their first.
Nice lungi dance, by the way.
Thank you very much.
I was supposed to experience that live, but I wasn't able to make the trip.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it was mad. I mean, the fans are so crazy, and I think, it's the longest green carpet I've ever walked on.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was very happy to welcome them this weekend. They were great. Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.